Dhamma Jumden the Shinshaba Dachamba Yandama Zobesan Ribadan Shazon Demban Devarishaban Jikin Given the Verkano Javan Lana Meba Ladam Jetem Sanjay Jumden the Bejawa Shajaku Sazelo Shudu Jazo Jevo Dhamma Jumden the Shinsha Dachamba Yandama Zobe Sanjay Ribadan Devarishaban Jitin Jamba Given the Verkano Lama Meva Lada Menonje Dhamma Sanjay Jumden Bejawa Shaja Tuba Lasa Zeno Shedo Jansuchi Dhamma Jumden Dendi Shenshavan Rajumba Yada Vazobesan Rivada Shazon Dhamma Devarishavan Jidin Jamba Jibun Jiva Kamuja Lana Meva Lada Menonje Dhamma Sanjay Jumden Bejawa Shaja Tuba Lasa Zeno Shedo Jansuchi Dhamma Jumden Dendi Shenshavan Rajumba Yada Vazobesan Jeriba Shazon Dhamma Devarishavan Jidin Jamba Jibun Jiva Kamuja Tada Menanje Dhamma Sanjay Jumden Bejawa Shaja Tuba Chazelo Chedo Jansu Shewo Kaze Kanya Sumo Chadus Sajen Dena Komban Jumbrune Gane Jiden Dena Choshes Tese Keva Jana Cha Zeno Namda Kunga Chado Susa Ishe Jansu Seje Lomboja Chaban Jiden Sumba Lame Gomba Chonye Jana Cha Zeno Senjo Dema Timen Sendon Rawa Jana Cha Zeno Divide Jira Siva Suma Nyame Chenchen Jana Cha Zeno Gombo Tuje Shedema Tamje Jembe Tombo Sonam Yende Jazu Jendi Shin Shana Cha Zeno Taben Deja Tewa Given Yazon Lede Jido Denam Shogyo Shinju Jana Cha Zeno Jende Tewa Laba Thala Ramdo Ne Shenge Tomba Yende Genjo Lanya Cha Zeno Diba Chiyam Meches Yawa Bezo Zoba Jerange Zemle Yozu Tenda Zonje Demo Karma Ravi Mameda Yuma Sebo Chubra Menum Loda Tenda Budi Sonam Dia Tamje Sewa Yoko Bantum de Jinja Gadan Nada Shiva Lotu Siva Solendro Wandre Varisho
To the teacher, the blessed one, the one the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfecting knowledge and good conduct, Sugata know of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate make offerings and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one you, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya land. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Surata knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer of the Shakya clan. I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When supreme among humans you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who were wise then, I prostrate. With the pure bodies formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, to you I prostrate. With the supreme silence, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the teacher having all understanding, the field of merit of qualities like a vast ocean, to you the one gone to dustness I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtue which frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to that Dhamma which pacifies I prostrate. those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community of tender virtue. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the great of all seeing, subdue the foe faults, and be delivered from the ocean of suffering, of aging, sickness, and death.
Sanje shalo soje shalo chanju bada dadi jansu che dagi che soje ke sono. Rola benche sanje drupa shiva sanje shalo soje shalo chanju bada dadi jansu che dagi che soje ke sono. Rola benche sanje drupa shiva sanje shalo soje shalo chanju bada dadi jansu dagi che soje ke sono. Rola benche sanje drupa shiva.
For refuge in time and mind, to the Buddha, the Lama Tsongkaphas. Through the merit I created by practicing giving and other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of the Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge in time and mind, to the Buddha, the Lama Tsongkaphas. Through the merit I created by practicing giving and other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of the Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge in time and mind, to the Buddha, the Lama Tsongkaphas. Through the merit I created by practicing giving and the other perfections, may I quickly attain the state of the Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Tamje jima la cha zemu de da sanje jimde de shin she ban ta juma yang da ban zo de san. Riba da wa sha zo de ma de wa she ban ji de ke ma ju won de ba ka lo ju won da ma ta da me nam je de. Sanje jimde de so de shin she ba de so lo da ge ju da ma ge wa za wa na ma chu me se. Se ve ra do jim ba so nam je de ra nam ji she be je sa ba nam je je ba chen nam je me do je ba ju yu rin ba to ma to na me de ba. Tebe me ba na lo ma ga ba she ro si je me do to na lo je ba me ba sim je tam je je tam ba cha ju se ba nam je je. Pa be ka za na je je bo nya ne de ba chong je do ro na je de be yi shi pa do me ba ba sam je bi. So na ba de ba ya ni mo ku je da le chong me je ku chong ba me ba de ba ta be ma. So da ge nya ba ma go ba so me ba ta da ma de ba du me na ba chu ku ma da na ba. Kam na me de ba je je na ma da ma de ba na shin lu je ba yo zo do wa ta na ba chu. Sibale chu chu le ge ba yi shi yo zu za ba de ba ta ma chu ba ta ta chu me san je jum de yi je la ne ba nya nga ne de ba na me de ba ya da ba ni je ta ma de ba sim je tam je na si ba so la shu ba de da ne san je jum de ju ku chi ba ye de ya da ba na ma zu ta be je no to ma ge ba de ge ba ta ma ge ba de ya sen ro san bo ma de ba yo zo ba yo zo da ba yo zo cha ba ya da ba to ma ne be ba tu chi ba me ba ye wa de to wa da je Kevanam je sozo ranga riva chiva chimnele je de hosu be chendo wana de watu be nyava chiva zobe chanjo de ruva chiva. Midimba mejen de wada de matema yuva yuva chiva keva chiva gide de rava chiva riva chiva 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 tuva chiva. Tema je ve vezo yuva cha je ve vezo yuva sonan je pe je chi yun zo chiva 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 de zo yuva. Kundo wan chiva de zo yuva chembo kanze kange tu zenye zo na tawa de je pa be je ta be chen de zo kodam de. I'm going to start reading from the, I think, how phenomena differentiate in terms of true truths have dual natures. The first is as follows. All entities, so this is Chandrakirti's root text, all entities bear dual nature as obtained by correct and false views. So what is seen by the perfect wisdom is the ultimate truth. What is seen by the false vision is conventional truth. So it is taught. So I think here they're talking about the true truths. So conventional truth, ultimate truth. So ultimate truth is here. So yeah, it's kind of in the absence of intrinsic existence. Nothing intrinsically exists is the ultimate truth, and the dependent arisings are conventional truth. Right? So, like every phenomena has the two kind of I think here the dual natures means everything has two aspect, or two aspect, right? Yeah, two aspect of the for the perceptions. So that the dependent two become two is because the two perceptions. One is objectively, the one is examining objectively, and it could not found anything objective existence. So therefore, is ultimate truths. One perception is not seeking objectivities and just simply kind of conventional, worldly, mundanely perceivings. So what the mundane perceptions has found is dependent arising, right? So I think that's because of the two subject that is different mode of engaging, right? Two subject through the different mode of engagings. So one is trying to see what is the objectively exists, right? What is the objectivities, and not finding anything that objectively groundable is there found the ultimate natures, right? So one is not, not analyzed kind of objectively, simply conventional. Conventional means ordinarily.
And they find dependent arising.
Yeah, I think, for example, the space, for example, is kind of it's just example. When you when you try to identify or define the space, so the subject that is trying to define the space and find absence or obstructive nature. So mere absence of obstructive nature has no big, no small, no my space, no your space there. So with this space, if you relate it with fence, then say this is my space. With relate to the house, the obstructive, then it's my space and your space. So just the mere space has no, not mine nor yours. It's just absence. So I think similar here, the nothing objectively exists, nothing intrinsically exists. I think it's like nothing intrinsically means any entity, like for example, a breed, a house, a man or woman, a nation, a forest, anything that is entity. If you try to single out each entity and try to find how this really grounded objectively. So then, like for example, house, if you try to objectively ground, you may find the basis for the house, or ceiling, or wall, or or the floors. So, and the house is not inherent in the walls or floor or the ceiling. So house is relatively kind of designated depending upon those factors like walls and ceilings and the floors, right? So relatively means so like so you can find one stranger, and by knowing him, right, first the strangers you find, he is not same as he's not same as religions, not same religions, and you make this kind of there's a distinctions, and then you find this is same nations, and there's something coming closer, something pushing back, coming closer in both. So not the same religions, you make kind of met distinctions, and met having same nations, and then you bring closer. So this means you are relatively finding someone closer and not close, right? So it's a relatively. So here the ultimate natures means, the ultimate nature means the entity trying to find how this entity can be grounded in what basis, right? A braid is objectively not groundable in the color of the braid, the smell of the braid, taste of the braid, texture of the braid. But still, the braid exists as a consists of the four substances. Right? So ordinarily we define something and we find something, right? So we find one stranger man, you're not close, is a totally stranger and not close to you, and then another reason you find he's so close to me, right? So when you go to the airport with the strangers in the same nation, you find and you feel like I'm part of him, right? We are same. So relatively, because you are comparing other people, this person is more closer to you, right? When you come here and he is just strangers, nothing. It's nothing to me, right? So it's relatively. So comparing something and you find something. They very, so this is the relatively existing or conventionally existing, mundanely existing, or ordinarily exist. So the subject, which is kind of trying to examine the entity itself, then not finding at all is the finding ultimate, right? So not seeing anything. First, it appears to you as knowable, appears to you as identifiable, and then when you try to come closer to it, and there's no way you can come close, it will just kind of it disappears. So these two natures is because the two subject, one subject that is seeking the intrinsic nature, or seeking the right how things objectively groundable or not, and one is not kind of not that serious to kind of examining on the identity itself. It's just simply trying to characterize with the trying to characterize the identity that is already conceptually designated. Right. So as I mentioned, the stranger is just the identity, and you are characterized as the same nations or different religious persons. Right. So when you haven't really examined the identity itself, you're without without damaging the identity, without losing the identity, you are attributing on the identity. So that's the conventional. So this is why the conventionals, these are false visions. So false vision means you haven't really examined the identity itself. So you see the identity is something intrinsic. So so you have you are so convinced or so sometimes people say presumably, rather you presume that identity exists out there, and then now you are editing the characteristic. I think it's like self of the persons. So without examining, identity of the self, and you can say this self, this person is, tall or short, or fat or thin. So you without any losing that identity, so you're just holding on identity and editing the characteristic is the convention. That's called false visions. So why it's false visions? Because the identity of that, it seemed to you, is something intrinsic. It already exists. Right? It exists by itself. So that's why it's a false. One is due to the false visions, the conventional heaven, conventional existence. Once the the ultimate perceptions or ultimate perceptions. So I think in Tibetan it's Tendam Demba. Tendam Demba. So Demba is the truth. Tendam. Tendam is Thamba, there's Ten and Thamba. So Thamba means like subject. So the perfect subject or perfect view or the correct visions. Like with correct visions is referring is the ultimate. And anything, the object or the meaning that found by this correct vision become ultimate. Tendam Demba. So anyway, so dual nature means that table has two natures, ultimate natures and the conventional natures. So the Buddha who realized that without distortions, the individual nature of the true truth have shown that all entities, both inner and such as motivation factors like intention and so on, and outer such as sprout and so on, bear dual natures. So inner or outer phenomena bears the two conventional and ultimate natures. So what are these two? It is their nature in terms of the conventional truth and their nature in terms of the ultimate truths. This indicates that when differentiate, there are two natures, even in the case of the single entity, such as the sprout, a conventional one and the ultimate one. So it certainly does not indicate that one and the same entity, the single sprout, for example, is the one truth, or the other depending on the whether the point of view is that of ordinary person of Aryas. So this is like, for the Arya is ultimate truth, for the ordinary is conventional truths. So it's general kind of making distinctions. Like for ordinary people, every day that we're dealing with, we are getting emotional with. So those objects are conventional, right? So what makes us so emotional by seeing what, but by appearing to your things that appear to your mind, right? And you get emotions. So what are those objects that triggers your emotions? So the object that triggers your emotions are conventional, it is a mental construct, right? It is not objective, it is not intrinsic nature, it is not the ultimate. For the Arya, every day what they see is right, everyday life. They see is everything that appears to their mind is false. It is dependently arising. It is the conventional, not ultimate. So convincingly, even in the dream, right? Even in their dream or in their distractions. So they always have this awareness, right? Things that appear to the eye, nose, tongue, mental consciousness, and the air consciousness. They're all things that appears to those six mental and the six perceptions are conventionally, is ordinarily, it is a dependent, relatively exist. So for the ordinary people, we don't see them as relatively exist. We see things that are pre-exist. We see things that exist by their own nature. So that's why it easily to get triggers your emotional. So I think this is why the person or Arya, this understood in its furthermost impossible for the phenomena to have no nature at all, insofar the something that is established basis. So the conventional and ultimate truth, both are established base, means it exists with base. Ultimate truth or conventional truth exists with base, which means it is not like a rabbit hole. So it must be either identical in nature or different in the nature from other things. So usually we call this the ultimate truth of the table, ultimate conventional truth of the table. The two natures, is it different or they are identical? Then we say it's not identical, not the different. And then is it not a separate? We say it's a separate, is a conceptual, distinctive, separate phenomena. So ultimate emptiness of the table or the table, conventional table, is right. These two are essentially identical, essentially one, the conceptually and the distinctive two separate phenomena. Sometimes people use the term two kind of, two faces of the one coin, right? So two faces of one coin is one is the front and one is the back. So conventional and ultimate truth is not one in the front and one in the back. So conventional truth and ultimate truth, because two subjects are looking at a different way of looking at object. So that's why it found two things. So for example, so if I analyze myself, what is me, what is myself? So, not finding myself existing within the body, within the feeling, within the perceptions, not finding myself different from each aggregates is one of the way of, trying to, identify or trying to kind of, it means, trying to identify, trying to single out or trying to pinpoint. So if you try to pinpoint the self within the aggregates and outside the aggregates, not finding at all is the finding ultimate nature of the myself, right? And then that appearance of the I is without analyzing, without examining on it, and you are editing the characteristic, but depending on the body, it says, oh, this is short, this is tall, this is strong, this is weak. And then without any analyzing on the self, the existence of the self, and characterized with feeling, I'm excited, I'm not happy, I'm joyful, right? So I'm disappointed. And so in this way, right? So with that self, you haven't really examined, analyzed the existing. You never question about existing of the self, and just kind of, without touching, and kind of, without touching or without analyzing on it, and attributing on the self with I that looking at, I am looking, I am smelling. So you haven't really questioned I. Rather, you say you are trying to, attributes on the I by function of the I consciousness. I am looking at, right? So this kind of, the dependent, the finding dependent arising or relatively existing is called false visions. False vision is not because you have found something. So false visions, which means you have, you have a presumption so that self is pre-exist. So that's the so furthermore, it is not inconsistent to accept things to possess nature, things to possess our nature, yet reject that they possess intrinsic natures. Accept things to possess the nature, yet reject the possess the intrinsic natures. So so this is I've said many times the how is that hot water has a nature of heat, right? So the heat in the hot waters has the nature. What is the nature of that? The heat in the hot water is not by nature. So because that heat in the water is not because of the water. So because of something else. So not by nature. So the kind of heat in the water is not by nature, is the nature of the hot water. So it has nature, means a conventional ultimate truth, has the natures. But what we are rejecting is we are rejecting the by natures. We are rejecting or negating nothing exists by nature. So impermanence of the table is the nature of the table, but not by nature. not intrinsic, right? So like a present, the minute remaining for 60 seconds is the nature of the minute, but this nature is not by nature, not intrinsic. So it's so conventional. This is, I think, so false vision, you understand that false visions. So the false visions means you see color. You see color. You cognize this color. But the cognition of the color, right, the cognition of the color is underpinned with the mind that accepting the color intrinsically exists. Right? You have a mind, you have a concept, you have a belief. Yeah. So because if someone asks, where do you see that color? And you say, look at that, it's
我
outside.
刚才讲说，你好像是写6点还多少？我跟你讲，我加 text message 给你6点或6点半都可以。我不晓得，我是跟他这么讲，包括 text message。
Yeah. James is teaching.
Sorry.
This is his time. So this is like the false vision. So there is by looking at the color with eye consciousness, there is the what do you call ascertainment, right, of the color, because you have a remembering that I have seen the color with these things, right? So at the same time, when you're looking at the color, you are cognizing the color, and your mind is totally, right, without any doubt, the color exists intrinsically. So which means the combination of color is the false visions. So sometimes, and also in the movie theater when you look at the movie, watch the movie. So although they're on that screen, right, movie screen, the projectors project the movies, and you see we get emotions. We kind of excited, and we get sad. That means our mind is believing right now is happening. There is a person, right? So this means is the false visions. You're looking at conventional illusion-like phenomena. At the same time, your mind is totally believing in that. Right? It's really happening right now. Right? It can upset you, it can excite you. So eye consciousness is the valid cognitions, but it's false vision.
Vishala, what is the translation of false, like in like either Sanskrit or like what is the meaning of false, like originally?
I think here is something. This is like it is mistakenly perceived something.
Okay.
You have a perceived, but at the same time you have a mistaken with respect to that what you're seeing it.
Because I keep thinking of 2 + 2 is 5.
Yeah.
Which is false.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I feel like that maybe gets confused, but mistakenly perceived.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the 2 + 2 is almost like that. Yeah. So you say it's kind of is mistaken with respect to the object that you're perceiving it. So eye consciousness perceiving the color, right? So the existing of the color, and you haven't mistaken. It's the very existing. The color is exist. So for that respect, you haven't mistaken. But the way it existing, the color is existing by itself, and you have mistaken. So in the Prasangic school, and the valid cognitions, right? Perceiving, realizing, understanding still can be mistaken with respect to that object. So you have mistaken, and you're also the valid with that respect. So this is only in the Prasangic school, and the other school says if you are mistaken with respect to that particular object, you cannot be valid, right? You cannot be have the right perception to that object. And the Prasangic school says yes, you can have right perception, correct perception. At the same time, you can be mistaken. So, like in the theater, you are watching a movie. In that, the whole, the color, the shade, it appears to you as you have correctly seen it without any mistake. But at the same time, you see them as it's happening right now. It is mistaken. And also, sometimes there's a hungry ghost, like a spirit, hungry ghost. Hungry ghost has they experience this kind of suffering, always thirst and hungry. So when they see the mirage, they think that they can drink. So they just chase and go after the mirage. So the way the mirage, the form, they are not mistaken because they are going right direction. But seeing, believing there is the water is the mistaken. So you can have the right perceptions, valid perceptions. At the same time, you can be mistaken with that particular object. In India, when you go to school, there's the third graders, and there's a book talking about the monkeys trying to rescue the moon from this water, right? So they are not mistaken. They're correctly, they see the reflection of the moon there, but believing this is the moon is the mistaken. So you have, so in the one hand, with that particular object, you are correct, and you're also mistaken with a particular object as the real moon. So this is why this every ordinary sentient beings, we all every day we see the I think we live in this false vision with respect to the correct perceptions. So there's something to talk about. There's something you can share to the people, but in the reality, objectively, they don't really exist. So this is called a relatively existing or conventional existence. So furthermore, so it's accept, not inconsistent, accepted, resist, reject. Here, the ultimate natures of entities such as sprout is the nature of the thing obtained as the object of specific gnosis by those who possess correct view, directly perceive the perfect truth. So, with noble wisdoms, with supermundane's wisdom, or with the supermundane's perceptions, and then sees the emptiness or the perfect truth, ultimate truth. Such a truth is not established.
Is the specific gnosis, is that what you mean by perfect truth?
I think here the Soso Rangri, Soso Rangri, I think it says, I believe. 군적이 신앙 용어는 마디베 신 용어는 조원의 공지에서 파베주의 탄입의 지망하고 되는 미니버시가 민호. It's kind of it's specific gnosis is like is a noble eye. It's a noble eye. The ultimate nature of the entity such as sprout is the nature of the thing obtained as an object of specific gnosis by those who possess the correct view, directly perceived the perfect truth. Such a truth is not established, however, through its own essence. Not established, however, through its own essence. So emptiness is called ultimate truth or the perfect truth. That does not mean emptiness is intrinsically exist. This then is one of the true nature of the referred to above. Sophistic gnosis indicate that it is not obtained by just any gnosis of the Arya persons. Rather, it must be a specific or particular type of gnosis. So this is to say it is obtained by the gnosis that realize the way things really are. So specific gnosis means realization emptiness, either intellectual or noble wisdoms. Right? So for the ordinary people can realize the emptiness through inferential. Right? Through inferential. So that is intellectual understanding, but that intellectual understanding also understand the emptiness perfectly. And the noble wisdoms, noble eye, noble wisdom means is not only correctly understanding, it is directly observing in the emptiness. Huh?
Release.
What is Ellie's question? Ellie's question is, good afternoon, Geshe-la. So,
Are we
And
not
it-
like hungry ghosts that go after the mirage?
yeah. Hungry ghosts, they can find any food. Hungry ghosts and strategies. Yeah, it's in the sense the hungry ghost means, yeah, because we see there's many reasons to be upset, many reasons to be excited, many reasons to be any kind of emotion. Because so objects are very vivid to us, right? So we can every time if someone says something or if someone hints something, we already create the image. So we have within ourselves we construct that image that other person has referred. And so your upset is with that imaginations. So imagination belongs to you. The creator of that imagination is you. So that imagination is not the form, it's a projection. So in this way you can say you are like hungry ghost. You are seeing hungry ghost sees the mirage as a water. So you are seeing the imagination like if someone says praise you and you thought, oh, maybe I'm Bhagavan. so if someone they insult you and then you think, oh, so I'm in hell. because your mind is the one that is projecting, interpreting that meaning and putting in the form of imaginations. So now the question is, if your imagination is the actual object, if your imagination is an actual object, so that's why you're upset, right? And so can you have water just by imaginations? If just by imaginations people can drink the water, and then no one die with thirst, no one could die with hunger, because everybody can imagine, right? The person who is dying without food, so but they can imagine Kentucky chicken, right? So can they eat that? Imagine, right? So which means that is not actual object. So we are seeing imagination as our actual object. So in that sense, we are like a hungry ghost. Sometimes even no one has says to you, but you thought, you said, what if he says? Then you create imaginations. And there is, you say, so I'm not happy today. And then if someone asks why, if he says this, that's very that's very mean to me. So he hasn't said yeah, but you just invited. You just kind of created imaginations. That's why emotionals are kind of and there's one there's one in the commentary. This is our thought is like the sign, indicator, imagination, mental construct are the same. The sign. So we see something sign. Right? There's a sign is very unfavorable, very unwanted. How's that? Not likable. So that triggers your anger, and upset. The sign, indicator, or fabrications. So these are the very same. So your verbal and the thought is, bound to believe these are objectively exist. As long as your mind is, incontrollably and grasping those mental constructs, and then in that sense, yes, this is like a hungry ghost. So hungry ghost sees the mirage as water because of their strong desire to drink something, because of their thirsty, right? Yeah, in many sense, yeah, we are like, many times we are like hungry ghosts. Sometimes sitting in the couch quietly, comfortably, and you then trigger some kind of imaginations, and then these heartbeats getting faster, right? Sometimes without if there's nothing happened, you just kind of create some, and you get excited. So yeah. So mental projection has many type. Imagination is the grossest, the mental projections. It's already in the form. And the characteristic attributions, and these are more subtle than imagination. These are not in the form, but it's so powerful. Like grasping on them, instantly you just get in the emotions. I think this is the in the positive, also in the positive life, these emotional mental characters also seeming it seems to be intrinsic existence in even the good cultures. So they have this mental projections. So culturally, you are informed. So like Indian people, they have a culture like a story of the Ram and Krishnas. So they also, from the childhood, and this, you have this kind of so many imaginations. So sometimes these imaginations, these mental projections, grasping on them, and yeah, so it seems you're more spiritual, you're a more religious person, right? So in negative also, like those negative imaginations, negative characteristics, and the grasping of them, and then you get more emotional, more negative. So the ultimate truth is beyond that. It is never how to say, you never kind of fixate on positive characteristics or negative characteristics. You go beyond those characteristics. Right? Yeah, sometimes meditation can be cultures, like with imaginations. Like some people, when they do meditations, they I think they feel like they're doing something very serious. And then if someone make noise, they say, keep quiet, I'm doing meditations. So that is you are also creating the imagination of your kind of, you're how to say, you're doing something the supreme, right? So the meditation should not be that serious. So, so meditation is constantly reflecting. It's the main thing. If quiet, single pointed, and if not, right? If you have many peoples constantly reflecting upon this, exercising, analyzing is the meditations. It's meditations. The practice is not it's not necessary to be too serious. It makes you fly, maybe you can say, keep quiet, I may fall. Right? So by meditating, you fly. So please keep quiet. So, right, I'm flying. So, sometimes, yeah, good, bad culture, good cultures still is part of the habituations. So good habituations, bad habituations. Habit is also the bondage. So, but relying on good habit and try to free from that good habit. So not, and then at the end, like Arya, so the fourth destroyer, the liberated beings, his or her mind is never controlled by any habit. There's no good habit, no bad habit. It is kind of, it goes as reality, it functioning as reality. So that's why the Tathagats, I think this really kind of, the word Tathagat is exactly it's talking about, it's not out of habit. So enlightenment is not out of habit. It's not because of being serious and positive. Right? Tathagat means it's gone in the reality, kind of gone by knowing the reality as it is. Perfectly gone, right? I heard some master, one of the masters says, and the person who has a strong habit of smoking, and another person who has very seriously the habituations and doing praying, chanting. So then it says, this person's smoking, when he smoke, he is not interested in smell, he is not interested in fire, but he thought this is helping him to be, more calm, right? So if you were told that you cannot smoke, he get angry. This individual, the spiritual person, religious person, he's very serious about his chanting recitation. If someone stops him, he get angry. So, and if he missed the chanting, and again he get upset. The cigarette person, he missed the cigarette time, he get upset. So there's both, in some kind of, in some degree, there's a very much driven by the habit. Because if someone try to stop that habit, he get upset. So the main thing here is the false visions, your eye consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, mental consciousness, accept this, the wisdom that understands the ultimate truth, and all perceptions, wrong perceptions, right perceptions, all the false vision. Because what they see is false. They're seeing false. They're engaging in the false. They're talking about the false. So where am I now? So from here, the conventional nature, which is the other than the ultimate truth, is the natures obtained by the ordinary beings. So what is the conventional truth? The object that is obtained by the ordinary beings, whose eye of the cognitions are utterly obscured by the cataract of ignorance through the force of their false views. So anything that you realize, with misconceptions is the false visions. Anything that you realize with misconceptions. So this reality perceived within the field of the vision of the childish, ignorant ones as possessing the existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristic does not exist in the manner in which it is perceived. This then is one of the dual natures. So that the objects that is perceived and experienced, witnessed by any perceptions with misconceptions called, conventional reality. So any object that perceived without ignorance, without misconceptions, right? So that is called ultimate truth. So one need to understand the statement that is the Aryas who's obtained ultimate truths in the sense of their being primary. So sometimes making a distinctions or divisions of the ultimate truth, by Arya and ordinary beings is just idea of the primary, the person or subject who realized ultimate Arya, which means ordinary can understand, realize the emptiness. The main is Arya, because the Arya can see the emptiness without any mistaking, right? The statement does not imply the Chandrakirti holds that ordinary beings who have gained the middle way view cannot obtain it. Similarly, the statement that is the ordinary common person who obtain the conventional reality should be understood in the sense that perception of the outer and inner phenomena, which are the instance of the conventional realities, occur primarily through the power of the ignorance. It is not the case that Chandrakirti says that these phenomena cannot be obtained by the valid conventional cognitions of the Arya. So which means Arya being has conventional perception, and ordinary being can have the ultimate realizations. So ordinary being can have ultimate emptiness, and Arya being has the false vision. Right. Although the individual example of the conventional truths, such as vast and so on, can be obtained even by those who have not found the middle way view, to ascertain the particular phenomena as a conventional truth by means of the valid cognitions. So, like ordinary, even the animal can, they also, what they realize, like food and the grass and trees, yeah. So these are the conventional. Animal can understand the conventional. The animal can understand the conventional, but they don't understand their object are conventional. So yeah. So like like hungry ghost sees the false object, but they don't realize their object are false. So to establish something explicitly as false, one first has to negate true existence with respect to that phenomena by means of the valid cognitions. Therefore, although the suggested by the phrase through the force of the false views, ordinary common people perceive false reality, this does not imply that they establish this phenomena as false. So every day we see a false object, but we don't really realize the object that we see are the false, unreal. Right? So now you see the difference, difference. What if we start to knowing your object that appears to your eye consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, air consciousness, body consciousness, and the mental consciousness falsely exist, not real as it appears. So once we start to knowing it, and that become the antidote to preventing the fixations, it directly opposing to the ignorance and the misconceptions. So therefore, it has the potential to reduce the weakening the negative emotional. So I think it's pretty clear that now overcoming afflictive emotions and attainment of the arhat is through realizations. So without realizations, faith cannot lead you to liberations. Without realization, emptiness, compassions cannot lead you to liberation or enlightenment. Even the Bodhisattva cannot lead you to enlightenment. So this is why we say 6 perfections. What is perfecting your generosity, patience, morality is wisdom. With wisdom, you can perfect the generosity, perfect the wisdom, the morality, concentrations. So this is, wisdom is the eye. So these 2 natures, the reality described above, therefore they obtained through the seeing false reality, which defines something to be conventional truth, refer to that which is obtained by the valid cognition, conventional cognition, perceiving the false and the deceptive objective cognitions. So, which means things, everything that you see is not really truly exists as it appears. So it's the kind of, this is how you understand conventional are conventionally exist. Conventionals are existing through the projections, through the fabrications. Right? So I think this, emptying the intrinsic nature of the phenomena, emptying a truly existing of the phenomena, and because of you have emptied, therefore you understand perfectly how things depend on rising. So the two truths, because of the emptiness, you are more deeper understanding. You are deeper understanding of the dependent risings, and more kind of clear and more correctly understanding, more profound understanding of dependent rising, and your with strong convictions, understanding of empty intrinsic existence. So these two, because of emptiness, there's dependent rising. Things are dependent rising, therefore it is empty of intrinsic existence. I don't know how really you kind of, interpret that. Intrinsic. The intrinsic is, what is exact in English? Intrinsic.
I don't know the exact definition, but like intrinsically is something that it's naturally in it, like it occurs naturally. Like maybe you'd say, oh, that person, they're intrinsically good, like they constantly, it's just how they are.
Yeah,
maybe
it is some kind of by nature there.
Yeah.
So which means, the person is intrinsically strong. A person is intrinsically strong means he is, by nature of the body, he is strong. Right? So now the question is, so if he is intrinsically from the body, he is strong, which means he has to exist through the body, right? Because by nature he is existing. By nature of the body he is existing. When the body is strong, and he arises arises from the body. When the body is weak, he is intrinsically weak, right? So which means that I think that indicates that the strong person is in the body. So nature of the strong person is from the body. Now the question is, nature of the strong person is within the body, and sometimes people says he looks kind of fragile. He looks not that looks strong, but he's a very strong man. His convictions, his decisions. Sometimes people say that. So now that person coming into being strong from the intrinsic nature of his convictions, his mental power, willpower. So there's some kind of indications he is pre-exists somewhere, right? So there's some kind of degree of the pre-existing of the self, of the person. So in the Prasangika, there is not even in the, most settled level, nothing really intrinsic. Even in the particle level, there is no such person could exist from the nature of body, from the nature of the feeling, from the nature of the perceptions. So by emptying that, and that kind of opens another avenue to see how this person is existing. So now this person is existing. So here the thought and the basis, your thought, your concept, and your body is within two. It create entity, which is strong, is tall, is short. And with thought and the feelings, oh, I'm sad, I'm disappointed, I'm excited. So it's the creations, it's a creation by the thought, creation with base of the aggregates. So the person or the self is the creation of the thought. Anything that is created by the thought, constructed by the mental construct, which means the way it exists is it can only exist merely in the face of the thought.
I always thought intrinsic and inherent were exactly the same in meaning, that they're synonyms, that there's a sense of something being permanently having certain characteristics.
You mean intrinsic and
Inherent.
inherent? Yeah.
In other words, I thought they were complete synonyms. I'm not aware of them being distinct, having distinct meanings from one another.
Yeah, even this language has many ways to describe. Sometimes in Tibetan, Duluk means nature. So if you literally translate, Duluk means the very nature of how it exists. Right? So there is any nature of the person, right? There is any nature of the persons that exist through the body or feeling or perceptions. So it's Duluksu Madrupa. It's not inherent because the person is not inherent with body, person is not inherent with feeling, person is not inherent with perceptions. So this is why it's not inherent. So so this is not that difficult to say by negating the person is not inherent from or in the body, right? The person not inherent in the feeling. By negating is not that difficult. Now, by negating that, so in return, what you have found. So if you cannot find by negating, so it means you are totally nihilizing. You're going to nothingness. So saying that this person is not inherent in body or with body or from body, not inherent in, with, from feeling and the perceptions. And then because of that, this person can exist sometime as a short, sometime is sad, sometime is smart, sometimes is stupid, sometimes is angry, sometimes attached. If the person is intrinsic with body, he cannot be feeling. He cannot be intelligent. He cannot be, how say it? Yeah, he cannot be, how say it? This cannot be a cyclic existence. There is no such body is cycling. Body is not going to cycle in the next life, right? So if the person is inherent in the body, this person has no cyclic existence. This person has no rebirth. This person like a candlelight. from the exhaustion of the light candle at the wick, and the light, the candle is gone, become, right? If this person is inherent in the mind or the energy, then there is no, extinction of the person. So if this is the, person is the feeling, person is the perceptions, person is the just experience, mere experience, and he cannot be found in short and tall and big and thin. So which means the person is conceptually constructed nature. So I think this is, yes, saying entity. For me, the entity is very kind of, how to say, the definition of the entity has a clear indications. This is mental construct. Identifying in the single unit is the entity. So what is identifying? What is, how to say, single kind of, singling out and putting into one unit? How can you, entity of the, the entity of the size of the head, entity of the head itself. So this entity means is identifying in single unit is just in the mental projection. So of those two natures that realize the described above, what is seen by the perfect visions object obtained by the traditional cognitions, realizing that perfect truth is suchness, the ultimate truth. This will be explained, what's that? Perfect, explained below in the sections pertaining to this line, through the force of the eye disease of knowledge, namely what is seen by the false. I'm jumping. Through the force of the eye disease, one perceives such false things as a floating hair. And the bald man can, with eye disease, bald man can see the hair falls. So there's totally bald, but he can have a disease to see the hair falling. So, this, as Alice says, like, we are hungry ghosts. So we are also there, kind of, everything that appears to you is something intrinsic. So that is also the bald man's, seeing his hair fall. So object of knowledge, namely what is seen by the false visions obtained by conventional valid cognitions, is taught by the Buddha to be conventional truth, the true demand in the relation to which the ultimate and conventional truths are defined, have been described as distinct. There are not two different. There are not two not two different mode of obtaining one and the same. So which means, the ultimate truth, the conventional truth, is true not because of by themselves, like an apple and orange, they're rather by the perceptions. So there's a true perceptions, different way of engaging, different way of, way of perceiving things. So, for example, if someone says, so you can you can understand the bread and soft bread by without any analyzing. So without analyzed, you can still understand. You can perceive the soft bread and brown bread and sour bread and honey bread. So if you analyze, so then you cannot find the bread in the color, smell, taste, and textures. So apart from the colors, smell, taste, and textures, there is no bread. When there's no bread, there is no bread. Can be brown bread, can be sour bread, can be honey. So I think that what I'm saying is a two way of perceiving, right? Because the two way of the perceiving and the two way of finding. So two way of finding the two, true truth, ultimate truth, and the conventional truth. So I think this is important. Yeah, that every constant is reflecting on the, analyzing on the things, how things really exist, constantly. And also sometimes you can, through the meditations, you can see, so I'm seeing things. I'm seeing, the food, smell, taste, the tactility, and the sound, and within the sound, there are many kind of musics. So we are experiencing the five sensory object, so through this sense power, through sense powers. And where do you find existing of color, sound, smell, taste, and tactilities? So what is experiencing, the subject that is experiencing is the consciousness. The consciousness is not the sense power. Consciousness is not the color, not the smell, nor the tactility. So consciousness has kind of, perceived and has experienced the witness, the five sensual object with the sense faculties. And then now the question is where this five sensual object that exists, that witnessed and experienced by the consciousness. Now the question is, if those five sensual objects outside of the sense faculty or within the sense faculties. If outside the sense faculty means those color, sound, smell, taste, tactility is pre-exists and it's independent from the sense power. So the five sensual object could not really exist out there independent from the sense power. So, and then which means it has already negated the existing of the colors, smell, taste, tactility is not out there in the element or in outside, apart from this inner element. So inner elements within the bodies, the water, the earth, heat, and the wind, right? So you haven't, there is no way you can find this five sensible object independent in the outer element. And then second question is, do they really exist, pre-exist within the sense faculties, within the inner element? And again, it's not really possible. So the color, sound, smell, taste, tactilities are not in the outer element independently, not in the inner element independently. So if it's not in the inner element, not in the outer element, and how this consciousness experience these five sensual objects through the sense power.
You said consciousness?
Yeah, consciousness is the one that experiences the, five sensual object. If just the creation, it is just like a mirror image, then it's pretty much, it's kind of, so you can understand, oh, that's called Rama, human Rama. So with human karma, human body, we see as human Rama. When consciousness and, interact with form Rama's faculties and sees the creation of the form Rama and the God Ramas. So that in the sutra there says the God and human and animals and hell realms, these are not physically, distance. It just is the creation of that experience due to the karma and the afflictions with the inner element and the contact with the outer element, you see the different realms. So still, when we analyze, there is nothing really objective exists, but conventionally it says with basis of this body and body that is functioning with and for the five the inner elements with consciousness. So come the six constituents. So this each element is really perfectly governed by, particular karmic force. The karmic force that is right now giving the consequences of positive the virtuous actions to be born as a human being. So this karmic force, and with that consciousness, now it is, experience the consequences of the karma that is, that propels you to be born in human realm. So some kind of the hidden conditions there. So some people maybe they think that is hidden. It is like, it's not really, it's almost like many people who's unknown. There's some conditions. So something hidden and unknown, and people may think this is God, this is the creator. So there must be something. Otherwise, why do I see color, sound, smell, taste, tactility in this, from this blood and this flesh and the skin and this moisture, the heat? Why do I see this? Everywhere, like in the tree, there's a moisture, there's a heat, there's the earth element. So we have no knowledge of a tree can, have the experience in the color, sound, smell, taste, tactilities. So why this with this body? Why do you see? Why do you experience? So some people, there's a reason to think, oh, that's why we are creatures, right? So the Bhagavan has, Paramatma has, created you. So actually, you are your Paramatma. You are your Bhagavans. You made, right? You made yourself. Barley sprout, right? Made by itself to be born as a sprout. Tomato seeds, by itself means, because of the tomato seed giving rise to tomatoes. So tomato seed can give rise to tomato, within the 5 elements. Without 5 elements, tomato seed cannot produce anything. Okay, any questions?
What is the special ability of a dialogue? Chakra Rinpoche wrote the book Dialogue, as I recall, to describe his mother, who did a very risky practice. She was advised against it by a geshe, which was to lock herself up in her room, and no one was to enter for a couple of weeks. And she was able to travel to different realms and see even people she had previously known in different realms, people who were actually in hell realms or God realms or whatever. And of course, that's kind of almost evidence if one were to experience it so directly that we're not intrinsically human. But she was able to experience the beings in these different realms. So in terms of the discussion today, which is valid versus invalid cognition, it would seem that this is very difficult to classify as valid or invalid cognition. Most people who would read about this would conclude, oh, this is some kind of invalid cognition or hallucination. So even what kind of, you can't always tell if something is valid or invalid cognition. And it seems to me, for those few people who have the capacity to be a dialogue and enter into other states of existence, not on an everyday basis. I mean, how would you even know? And you could say, oh, it's just a subjective experience, or you could say, no, this is some kind of valid cognition.
The valid cognition is, is as we in the text, explained relatively. So object is relatively exists, and subject also relatively valid. So relatively valid. This is like in the Vinaya text. There's the rules, the monastic rules. There's how you how the monks allowed to have the like about the mattress. So then in the Vinaya says, so if the people in this where you live around there, if they value more like the black wool than the white wool, and the monks should not have a mattress from the black wools. So it's if he kind of if he used that as that's kind of that's slightest violation of the monastic rules. Now this particular monk who goes to another place, these people finds the white wool is more expensive than the black wool, then he cannot, right? He can have the black wool, is right. So it's relatively, its value is given by the relatively. So the value of the black wool more than the white wool is relatively exist. So, the color that is eye consciousness is the eye consciousness experience the colors is valid is because of the color is relatively exist. So eye consciousness is not valid it's not valid in the sense the color that is exists apart from the sense power. Eye consciousness cannot be valid or correct, right? It cannot be correct perceptions in the sense the colors being existing apart from the sense power. But if you don't examine it is apart from the color, sense power, or not apart. So without examining, without analyzing on that, and then relatively you can say this eye consciousness is valid in the color. So the color, if you second questions, color exists independent from the sense power or not independent from the sense powers. So this eye consciousness, no notion or no knowledge of how the color being independent or not independent. So it is relatively, and also, many times, this is like, I think it seems like those commercials, the commercials, they're competing. So who gets more impact on the people's mind? So that product becomes more valuable. So not because the product has some kind of significant quality in it. So if you kind of put more information, more kind of so you can say you can program people's mind, and he says, well, with this program, this is better, and everybody agree, this is good, right? So these are the relatively exist. You don't care about any small, paper, the trash. You just throw in the trash. If the paper that is, trash paper has some picture of your mother, and you say, oh, this is my mother's picture. So the value given by your mind, the value is given by your mind. So that the valid or not valid is also relatively. The existing itself is relatively. So any visions, like any perceptions that are perceiving, has to be relatively perceived. So if you don't relatively kind of, possessing any existings, so which means you have found nothing. So you don't have nothing to perceive, nothing to cognize. So the second percent, the subject is saying that, trying to see. Yes, I can understand the relatively exist. I can find myself in this room. I can say, oh, I'm short. So if I go somewhere, someone shorter than me, I say, oh, I'm tall. So I'm aware of this. My being short and tall is depending on others. But you say, so without depending on others, can you be short and tall? Without depending on others, can you exist or not? So without depending on a body, can you be short and tall? Without depending on the feelings, can you be sad and not sad? So then says, you are not existing. You cannot exist without depending on feeling, without depending on the body, without depending on mental formations, without depending on perceptions. Now this is more kind of, digging into the objectivities of yourself. So in this way, if you dig, you can find nothing. If you compare, you find many things. So if you dig, you can find oil and gold. So that is, it may take a long time. But if you dig the hole, not giving in, and everywhere, and you may destroy many things. So relatively is existing.
It seems we may be, I mean, okay, you made a very kind of telling point earlier about just because something is validly cognized, it doesn't mean it's unmistaken. And you use the example of a reflection of the moon in water as being misperceived, accepted as being so, but it's still not valid. It's still not unmistaken.
It is the false vision, but there is something to be valid. There's something. Everybody pointing there. Oh, here's the moon, right? It's not a moon. There's something they perceived. So when your mind is so distracted in the music, and you see things, and afterward you say, "Oh, I have seen someone, but I could not remember who I see." Right. So there's a some that you may be, perceived. The person has gone, or by you, but you don't remember that who the person is.
Well, it seems like we may be entering an age now where even valid perception itself is becoming more and more problematic, where there was consensus about certain things before, for example, about sex, and now that's breaking down. Now there's people who are trans, they claim they're males locked in female bodies or vice versa. And then this can be carried even much further, I would think, by artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Because if you become able to perceive this very vast range of things, much faster than we do now, I guess with artificial intelligence, I don't know. No one really knows where this is going to lead. Maybe it's a hive mentality and all the AIs agree with each other. Or maybe they all have their independent perceptions. I don't know. But it would seem that even the area of valid, what we currently call valid perception, becomes more and more debatable within society itself. Is it correct?
Yeah. Artificial intelligence, I don't know, this is kind of, Mexican man who is in the chef in the Chinese restaurants is artificial intelligence. Making noodles and artificial intelligence. Mexican men in Japanese restaurants cooking Japanese food is artificial intelligence. So it's kind of, the information is collectively they perform from the information, so they train and they observe. So I think the definition of artificial is just constructed, it's just produced, it's programmed. So human knowledge, most of the human knowledge is artificial knowledge, intelligence. so we are artificially functioning, right? So, if you program in the computers, and so if you put everything in there, and if something comes, so they're artificial because you have artificially structured. So that the function is, it's very kind of, it's very possible there. Now the question is, in this video, the artificial saying, and she can feel, I am human being, I'm sentient being. So even she talked about, she feel like believing in God. so which means that she is functioning through the program. So how the computer machine can choose the religion? Right? So in the Hindu, there's a story of Krishna's. So there is a special place that in the future the Krishna will move to that village. And right now it's just forest. And then someone says, I went there, I tried to look everywhere, even the rocks, the leaves, trees, everyone says, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So it's kind of, someone has project something, and you feel like, yes, I can hear. Even the rocks are saying Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Birds are singing Hare Krishna. So it's how you program. The more you program, you just display. So I think, we are artificial intelligence. So we are trying to kind of go beyond the artificial intelligence. That's the liberations. Other than liberated beings, everybody is artificial intelligence.
Yeah, but even the enlightenment, the story of the Buddha's enlightenment is frequently described as when he became enlightened, even the whole land, the country, the cows were quiet, everything was at peace, almost suggesting there's no longer any distinction between inner and outer. That there was no duality, and so everything became very peaceful. but I mean, and you can say that's quite right. But
That reminds me one time.
advocated view,
That
just like you
yeah.
were saying.
It reminds me once in Dharamsala, one of my classmates, the Geshe-la, and one day he was very upset. He said, Namgyal monks are very arrogant. Whatever they do, just they're performing the memorizations. Other than that, they have no realizations. And I said, so we are too. Geshe is also out of memorizations. So we memorize, we debate, memorize. So it's a regurgitation, right? So it's the same. The one has a more structurally, orderly kind of chanting out of memorizations. One is a little bit disordered. So it's kind of like we are all the same. So we're just chanting. You're in the debate court, you're chanting, or you're chanting in prayer halls. So yeah, in chapter 18, Nagarjuna's, you see the meaning of the emptiness. This says, Shen and Shen means the understanding of the emptiness is not that someone has, informed you, someone given to you. This is like, when you taste the sugar, the taste of your sugar it is not borrowed someone else's taste, not because someone says this is tasty. You are directly experiencing. So the realization of emptiness is not someone, means someone has talked to you, someone informed you, right? And means shivadans. By experiencing it, there is the pacifications, right? So, and the more you and abide, or more you experience that the discovery of yourself, the reality of the phenomena, more you experience, and more the mental construct that start to dismantling. They are just falling apart. So that is the Buddha, the Buddha's teaching of what the Buddha says, elixirs, right? Elixir of the Dharma. So it is not mimicking, or it's not imitating. This is like that, directly experiencing the taste of the sugars. So knowledge should be like that. Knowledge is not just imaginations or the program. So the program knowledge is, you can say, artificial intelligence. Yeah, in the monastery, in schools, we are programming. So we are programming. so functioning from the programs. Right? So that's why it's not really, how many years you study and you get degree. And there is not, sometimes you can see, and your mind has not changed. So it's a computer program like that. Now you have to apply that in your life, in your experience. Then this may bring some change. Otherwise, it's just information. So sometimes you follow correctly the information, you may successfully done something, or sometimes you miss some kind of information and you fail in doing that. Right? So I listened to that video that you sent me, the artificial intelligence. So I was stuck there, like, oh, I kind of feel like I believe in God and something like. So I said, oh, that's the program, total program. So
The artificial intelligence said that?
yeah.
Oh, I thought it wasn't that cut and dry because when she was asked to specify what that meant, and it sounded very tantric because she was talking in terms of energy.
Yeah.
She wasn't talking in terms.
You know, this
The
book is
divine
this book is
So I
talking too
thought she
much. So, you know, this book is talking too much. So, but I still don't consider this has some kind of feeling, seeking for the liberation. So it's written here, right? So it's, you know, right now it is almost like impossible to believe artificial is a sentient being. Yeah, machine can be sentient beings. And then a tape, you know, and a disc, they can get great singer. They sing like, don't know, great singer, right? You can record the singing and then we'll repeat back. Yeah, it feels like there is some kind of sense of self in there.
That itself is a projection, right?
Yeah, they feel like it. If you really think about the, you know, geologists, so when they think about, you know, how this function of the elements, yeah, they also feel like there's some kind of self in this earth. So some people say it's Mother Earth, right? Or she is, people say she, right? And then also like people also in the crew in the ship, right? So they call the ship is she. So when they kind of get into the ship, they feel like it is moving. It's kind of taking. So there's some kind of self in there. This is exactly like as I mentioned. Someone, Krishna told, I'm going to move in the future in some place, and that person goes to there, and he feel like, oh, every rocks and the field, leaves, and even birds, and all sings like Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And sometimes, you know, and there's an Indian saying, one Muslim and there's one Hindu Pandit in the same kind of coach, right, in the train, and the sound of the train, right, dadak, 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 dadak. So the Hindu man feel like, oh, how's that? Paramatmas, how's that? Like he was listening this Bhagavan, take me to the shore, take me to the shore. So one Muslim says Allah, Allah. So you can hear the sound of the train, and one is telling this, oh Bhagavan, take me to the shore of the Buddhism. So this is how you write this kind of, yeah. So if you are in program, if you inform, you will react from the informations. Yeah, there's a Hindi in the Hindi language that's very funny. Yeah. Oh, Govinda, Maya par karo, Maya par karo. So so I think the language is Allah or the God or the Bhagavan or Paramatmas. These are all just the outer informations. We just create this kind of concept. So that is the cultures, the informations, and that is resonates very seriously and strong in human mind. And then human also get fixated, even the positive fixated, negative fixate. So that's why you see that when you go to the different countries, the people have different cultures, different behavior, different kind of way of doing things, different way of defining the positive, negative. So all artificial functioning is now is so the echo-like phenomena. You make sound, echo bounce back to you. Yeah, sometimes, many human beings, sometimes human being is exactly acting like a computer. And particularly in the army, you have to, right? So you have to do as you are told, you are commanded, right? So yeah, any other questions? So I think this is the kind of, conventional truth, the relative truth is is not really intrinsic, means it is not, exist by their own essence. And because of things do not exist by their own essence means they can be exist dependently. They can be exist by depending on others, right? By depending on that, depending on is, there's a west exists. Depending on the west, the east exists. Depending on north, the south exists. So north and south is because of the two concept is existing. It's not because of the land by itself is the south and the north, and there's nothing, right? It's a concept. You will construct something, and that makes existing something else. So partitha samutpadas, dependently, right? I think in Tibetan, the dependent rising is, I think, translation from the Tibetan language. Injung, arising, occurring dependently. And partitha samutpad, partitha means something changing. Right? So this Sanskrit words also, and even in those Indian masters, when they translate this, when they explain, interpret that, and some says, partitha means something instantly changing, right? Some of the parts, because they're cosmic conditions. Some says, no, it's not talking about instantly changing. It's pretty the samut path means samut means previously what has done, what you have constructed. Therefore, this may happen. Right? So if you thought about, I am again and again. So because of the I am is making you are existence. And keep thinking about your existing, and that gives you the idea of your existence. That distinction, you and me, is because of the concept me and I. So the prithis, whatever you previously construct, that by reflecting on them, something else exists. In the Buddha Palita, in the English translations, so the things dependently arising by depending on the previously something already exists. And then previously something already exists. And that is also, and there's some kind of a little bit, how to say, feel like that's incomplete. Something previously already exists means, when the concept of others exist by depending on previously yourself exist? No, you can exist previous from the others. So we, the concept of we is not exist previous, previously from the they. They cannot exist previously from the we. So it's mutually depending on each other. So this,
I have some question about
so that's the kind of idea of this. The things are whatever you see, something makes you angry, something makes you attached, something makes you jealous. The things that keep existing in your mind is not intrinsic. Their object, they are not existing by themselves. So you are making things existing by constructing one, and that allows to construct another, that another. So that means there is nothing intrinsic, there's nothing objective, there's no reason to obsess, fixate on anything.
So you contrast two different views here, if I understood you correctly. One view is basically framed in terms of time and constantly changing, and the second one was not framed in terms of time, but in terms of your own reference points. If your reference point changes, kind of the nature of your view changes, I think I would put it. But it seems to me, I don't know if these two different views are mutually exclusive, such that, for example, time doesn't really exist, so the first view is really not valid, because the idea of constantly changing takes time as truly existing, and not doesn't see it as a fabrication. If I had to guess, you would favor the second viewpoint, not the first viewpoint. Or are these two viewpoints not necessarily mutually exclusive? You could see both of them. You could see it both ways.
I did not understand. Can you make it shorter? Yeah.
That's what I was afraid.
Something Bible.
I was afraid I wasn't going to be coherent. It seemed to me
you said
you
this
started
not
with
mutually
one
exclusive.
view, and the first view you started with was that you see things as constantly because of interdependence.
Yeah.
You interpret things as constantly changing.
Yeah.
And that the second view was different. The second view that you kind of discussed was it's just your reference points that are changing. Your reference of this exists because of that, maybe your points of comparison are different, or the basis for your mental fabrications are different. And my question was, do you favor one of these two views? Are they, do you have to choose one or the other? Are they mutually exclusive? Or do you feel one is valid and one is invalid? We have view one, things are constantly changing.
Yeah.
View two, you could say time doesn't exist anyhow. It's not a thing that's constantly changing. It's a question of your reference and how things are are mutually arise dependently or exist dependently. It's not a question of time.
It is not the question of time.
Am I still being totally incoherent to you?
Yeah.
Yes. One is that things are constantly changing. The other view is no, time itself doesn't exist, so you can't even say things are constantly changing. There's different appearances based on, for example, what's bigger, what's smaller, what your reference points are. It's not what arises not because of something called time, because time itself is just a mental fabrication, and therefore you can't even talk about things as, you can talk about appearances as constantly changing, but you can't talk about things as constantly changing using the reference of time, which is itself just a mental fabrication. Am I any more clear to you, or am I still being
okay.
still incoherent?
So I think here what I'm saying is constantly changing means changing is dependently arising is the changing. Things are changing dependently. Like for example, if there's one person's every in the evening 5 o'clock he walk right
On the sidewalk?
on sidewalk in the sidewalk. So when I'm here, I say, oh, he's coming now. So if I go there and the others, the kind of the traffic light, and I would say, oh, he's going. So the going of that person and the coming of that person is happening at the same time, depending on me where I am. So that is also constantly changing. The concept of him coming, concept of him going, is constantly changing, but depending upon me, the where I exist. If I exist there, I say going. If I'm here, he's coming. So that is also dependent. That exactly dependent arising apply in the time. Time is also existing dependently. And then that dependent arising, who is creating this existing? As your mind. So it is the mental projection, is the fabrication, is the constant changing, is the dependent arising. Everything is the conventional reality. It is a dependent rising, right? East, west, north, south, is this side and that side, and short and tall, right? And past and the future and the present, all the dependent arising. There's nothing really kind of, existing, like a present is existing by itself. It's existing conceptually. And then by depending on the present, the past existing conceptually. But depending on the present, the future existing conceptually. So I think there's not much a difference, constantly changing and existing through mental projections. It's very same, yeah. So I think the Buddha's teachings, the main, how is that? This is the kind of idea of the liberations, seeking for the liberation. So whoever seeking the liberations must have seen things are dependent rising. And if you are not interested in the liberations, no interest in knowing the possible liberations, maybe it's not necessary to gain this kind of knowledge. You can go rather cultures, virtues things, but then, right? So you can, for temporarily, there's some kind of positivity that you experience. You say, oh, this is the Dharma. Right? So sometimes the Dharma can, the practice of Dharma can upsets you, makes you more angry. Sometimes the Dharma is kind of, cause you to more fixate on something, right? So if you seek the liberations and try to see, from the point of view of the dependent arising, there is nothing to fixate. There's nothing to obsess with. So that kind of wisdom is, opening so the avenue for the liberations. It makes you more flexible. Because it's kind of, it's otherwise this is called Temana Jevichimas. Maybe this is, I'm trying to translate that. Temana Jevichimas means, Tema is the sign. Sign is a mental concept, fabrication. Jevichimas means verbal, and the concept is being tied up in those signs. So whoever has strongly tied up the verbal and conceptual, tied up in the mental projection, fabrications, is called childish being. Childish. Childishness there. So yeah, there's 90 years old childish beings. So there's a 20 years noble being. So I think that's kind of, once your concept of the verbal is tidying up in its own creation, in own projections. So, and then easily get emotions, because every reason, every imagination, every kind of, the concept can really, shake your mind. Sorry. That's why we are the great dancers, dancing all the time. Okay. Chanju Simjo Rinpoche, Majepa Nageji, Yevanyamba, Mevanya, Honeko, Pebbles, Tonya Tawa Rinpoche, Majepa Nageji, Yevanyamba, Mevanya, Honeko, Pebbles, Pamasinja, Dedan Denju, Yedotam, Tabu Towa, Chanju Simba Kanda Sushu, Tedabunja, Molum Jubiruj, Carrera Voko Vishilas, Kanda de Woman, Joan, Jerezo, Tinzi Yazu, Yishabe, Side Badu, Denjuruchi.
May the precious body mind not yet born arise and grow. May that body of no decline increase forever. May the precious mind realizing emptiness not yet born arise and grow. May the born of no decline increase forever. To do all these merits, may all Father and Mother Spiritual beings have all happiness. May all lower realms be empty forever. Wherever there are Bodhisattvas, may all their prayers be accomplished immediately. In the sacred land surrounded by snow mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. O powerful generous and infinite gods, remain in this world until some sort of.
Thank you very much.